everyone, and welcome to the Future of Health with Providence St. Joseph Health. I'm your host, Mary Ranoff, bringing you the latest in healthcare trends and news each week. Today, I'm joined by MC Jenny, a clinical social worker and therapist with the First Step Resource Center at Providence St. Patrick Hospital in Montana. We're talking about the center's effort to reduce trauma and promote healing for victims of abuse. MC will also share how the center is changing the way we respond to children with problematic behaviors through an innovative new pilot project. Remember, everyone, if you have questions for our experts, please share them with us on social media. We can be found on Twitter at PSJH and on Facebook under Providence St. Joseph Health. Use the hashtag #FutureOfHealth. That's hashtag #FutureOfHealth, and we'll be on the lookout for your questions. The following program contains sexual content that may be triggering for some listeners. Anyone affected by sexual assault can find support on the National Sexual Assault Hotline by calling 1-800-656-HOPE. Again, that number is 1-800-656-4673. Before we get started, I also want to remind our listeners that the information provided during this program is for educational purposes only. You should always consult a healthcare provider if you have any questions regarding a medical condition or treatment. So let's get started by welcoming our guest. Thank you for joining us, MC. Can you share a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Mary. I'm glad to be here. I work at St. Pat's Hospital here in Missoula, Montana, and I am currently the licensed clinical social worker there. And one of my activities in any given day is to put some attention on our program for problematic sexual behavior in children.
Wow, that sounds very deep and intense.
It can be.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the First Step Resource Center and how you came to work here.
Okay. First Step is part of Providence St. Patrick Hospital in Missoula, Montana. We're a nationally accredited children's advocacy center and adult sexual response program. We exist to improve the community response to child abuse and adult sexual violence and to support victims of abuse and their families in recovery. We provide confidential and compassionate medical evaluations, evidence collection, and forensic interviews. First Step's mental health and family advocacy staff provide crisis intervention, referrals for follow-up care, counseling, and on-site therapy. And currently my role is the on-site therapist.
Wow. What does a forensic interview include?
A forensic interview means it's a legal interview with a child. So in our case, we have nurses on staff who are trained forensic interviewers. So they are trained in child development, they are trained in how, when, what questions to ask without being leading. So it's it's a child-led interview in order for there not to be complication in the court system.
In the trial side?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And I would assume then that how you approach the child changes greatly by their age, right? So they're trained for that.
Not only by their age is a starting point,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's developmental.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that child developmentally, and how does that get determined? And part of the forensic interview susses that out. There are ways for it to become evident, what a child is able, willing to communicate.
And you already mentioned the family, so you're not just really taking care of the child themselves, but the entire family. What does that mean for the family? What kind of services are those?
Yeah. Well, for the first few years at First Step, I was actually the care coordinator, which meant I was like the control tower person. I didn't fly the planes, but I made sure that everyone was safe. And what I did was I was the first contact with the family. So I'll just walk you through what that was like. Okay. We accept referrals, self-referrals. So
Okay.
Centers are different across the United States. We happen to be a medical model. And so it makes it so we're able to take calls from anyone in the community. We also get referrals from law enforcement. We get referrals from Child Protective Services. And
from within your own emergency room, I would think too, yes?
Are you asking, do we have an emergency room?
Well, do you get referrals from an emergency room?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, we do, yes.
Okay. So you said within the community, so if I was a concerned neighbor, I could call in and ask for a child to be seen? Is that what that means?
Yes, and we wouldn't start with necessarily, I think this child should be seen, but we would really have a discussion about what is the situation, what are your concerns, Has there been a report? Have you reported to Child and Family Services yet? So really that care coordinator is getting to know what the situation is and being there. As you can imagine, when people call, they're in at some level of alarm.
Sure.
And so part of that care coordinator position family advocate position is to just help that person through that and help them be as concrete as possible, yet be able to also express emotionally what they're going through.
Sure.
So that the family is connected with us and an appointment is made, and then that family, when they come in the door, then they meet with that person again, with the care coordinator again.
Okay. And is it always the same care coordinator? I mean, as often as possible, do you try to have consistency?
As often as possible. We have had amazing university master's degree practicum students in our office.
Okay.
So we do some training around that to help them cover the advocacy.
It's such
families.
A beautiful body of work, but it sounds like it would be very emotionally tough. Is that something to consider, especially when you're talking about like residents or people in training? Is it something that you have to really have a lot of fortitude to do?
You know, people ask me, how do I do this work?
Mm-hmm.
And what I have come up with was, I'm not sure how, but I can, so I do.
You do?
Yeah. And in fact, in our office, there's a lot of laughter, there's a lot of joy, and part of that is the way we cope with with the families we're working with. But really, it feels like a fortunate, really lucky position to be in.
Yeah. It's definitely necessary, and it's neat. It's so important, and I love that people like you are called to do it, because you're right, it is tough. We had this conversation recently at end-of-life care. How do you become a doctor who focuses basically on end-of-life care? So you go into it knowing, but going into a field where you're going to be working with children who are hurt or damaged, it's tough. So thank you.
There's something so real and authentic about being able to be with someone at a point in their lives where there's no pretense.
Yeah.
It's all there is real, and that's really a privilege.
Yes, it's amazing. The Child Advocacy Center, is that something that most communities have, or is it rare that you actually have something that specializes in children for children?
There are just over 800 children's advocacy centers across the United States right now.
That doesn't sound like a lot, actually.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
Wow. And what does it take to become a child advocacy center? Is it having all of the right resources pulled together, the right training?
It takes someone being connected and knowledgeable about the potential of having one, and then finding a source for supporting that. And in our community, we're so lucky to have Providence St. Pat's support our program. And
well, so being part of St. Pat's, you're part of the multidisciplinary team, right? The Missoula multidisciplinary team. What are the purpose and benefits of that?
Wow, that's a great. To me, it's not even a question, because it's so natural. We get to have a multidisciplinary team, and you asked earlier how we become an accredited children's advocacy center, and part of that is that we meet standards that are created and under the umbrella of the National Children's Alliance.
Okay.
And we're actually in our accreditation year right now, so we're preparing for that. So we're looking at all of our processes. We're making sure that we're meeting all of the standards. There are amazing new mental health standards for us to meet, and we're making sure that we are doing that. And part of the problematic sexual behavior program that we're doing, that really feeds into that standard.
So constantly always optimizing too and getting better.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about the standards too is that part of that is we must collaborate with our agencies in our community. And it is a gift. These are agencies, one might think that these are agencies that they may get siloed in terms of how they work, their style of work, the way they're thinking, their principles, their values. And what happens is, because we need to be a multidisciplinary team, is we learn from each other, we listen to each other, we hold each other accountable for the work, and all of that is so that we can all best serve the children and the families and the victims.
Yeah. It's almost like you become a little family yourself.
Yeah. You know, the value that we have put in place for ourselves is always assume goodwill.
Oh, I like
And that has saved us so many times when
Sure.
the conflict, when things get heated, because it is, as you say, it is tough work.
Sure.
We go back to that. We go back to when I might be questioning why another agency made a certain decision.
Mm-hmm.
I remember in their position, they made a decision based on things I probably don't know.
They thought it was the best decision to be made for the
so
best
it
interest
just
of the child.
encourages, we're infused with communication.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about Providence's First Step Resource Center.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. Oh, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. If the sky that we look upon should tumble and fall, or the mountains should crumble to the sea, I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me. Whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me? Oh, stand by me.
Well, we are back with Future of Health. I'm your host, Mary Ranoff, with a reminder that anyone affected by sexual assault can find support on the National Sexual Assault Hotline by calling 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 1-800-656-HOPE. Now let's get back to our conversation with clinical social worker MC Jenny. MC Jenny, I understand that the First Step Resource Center is very innovative. Can you tell me about your latest pilot project and who the program serves?
Well, you say the word innovative, and I just want to acknowledge that there are others across the country who've come before us doing a lot of research and creating evidence-based and informed treatment models based on child development. So it's not as if we are the first ones to look at this issue. What happened was, I started at First Step about 6 years ago, and when I was in the role of working with the MDT during interviews, we would come across a child who we knew had problematic sexual behavior. And I would talk to the team, and I'm looking at law enforcement, and they're looking at me, and Child Protective Services is looking at us, and we're thinking, what are we going to do about this? It just seems not appropriate to respond in a legal, criminal, punitive kind of way. And Child Protective Services didn't have any mandates that said, okay, when there's a child in a family and there's problematic sexual behavior, this is what we do.
Right.
So what was happening is no one agency was able to say, okay, we'll own this and we'll carry through. And so it didn't feel good. And at that time, we started thinking about and struggling with, well, what can we do instead? And so we started asking these questions, and then lo and behold, information across the country started cropping up about other agencies struggling with the same issue.
Right. Seems like it would be a common struggle for sure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way that this program came to be, which is really focused on problematic sexual behavior. Is that correct?
Yes, this particular program, yeah.
And can you explain to people listening what is problematic sexual behavior?
Yes, I can. It is, first I want to start by saying there's a spectrum of behaviors, so it's not either or.
Mm-hmm.
And there's natural and healthy sexual behavior in children. We're born as sexual beings.
Sure.
And there is concerning behavior, and there's problematic behavior, and then there's harmful behavior. So it's really important to look at that behavior, to be specific about what was the behavior exactly, but most importantly, not to say, okay, that's the behavior, and that's who that child is now, which currently is what our system response, and in the past, historically, our system response has been that.
You guys say label the behavior, not the person,
Yeah.
right? That's what you mean.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what I mean.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a child with problematic sexual behavior is so much more than that incident or the incidents that have happened. And that's really the crux of our program, is that it looks at what else has happened to this child.
Mm-hmm. This
This is most likely a symptom of other events in this child's life. So we're actually treating the symptom, a trauma symptom, the symptom of sexual behavior. We're not focusing on that.
doesn't seem like it should be that hard to comprehend, because if you get a cancer diagnosis, cancer is not what defines you as a person.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have this behavior, it isn't who you are. It's just something that happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Except
Mm-hmm.
in our culture, we say the word sex, we say the word sexual, we hear the word sexualization, and it's easy to get alarmed by that.
Sure.
It's a taboo topic. We see it everywhere, yet it's hard to talk about at the same time.
Everywhere, right.
Yeah, so it brings an added level of disturbance.
So then stigma reduction has to be part of what you work on as well, which is, right, like this is not, it's not that it only happens to 1 in 5 million people, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is something that many parents are going to deal with over the lifetime. So
It is very common, and in fact, in 2018, there were upward of 22,000 children under the age of 13 who were identified as, quote, alleged offenders, and unquote, children who have sexually harmed another child. So what that brings up is the language can dismiss the notion that children can learn and be taught and evolve when well guided through their life experiences and an experience of sexual behavior.
So this is child on child, not necessarily adult to child or child to something else, but this is child on child.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And when we talk about our program, I'm talking about 14 and under. That
Okay.
was the choice that we as a committee made. We've been meeting. Our committee involves county attorneys, mental health providers, people who have worked with sex offender treatment programs, and other mental health providers as well. Law enforcement, Child Protective Services has been a part of that committee, and we have decided that while the treatment models really are about 12 and under, we wanted to include 13, 14 years old, because we wanted to make sure that we're able to capture families in that age range where a treatment model may be more beneficial to the child and the family and the community
Sure.
than another kind of response.
Well, and I would think, too, you talked earlier that it's not just age, it's developmental. You could be 14, but really be typically developmental at a 12-year-old level as well, right?
So it allows for that.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So when we talk about these behaviors, how can you tell the difference between a typical behavior and a problematic behavior?
Okay. A problematic behavior would look more like repeatedly showing or looking at private parts, not recognizing boundaries with other kids, more aggressive sexual acts, use of force or threats or bribes in sexual activities, causing harm, physical or emotional, to another child, sexual activity with children of a different age. We look at what is the age difference or developmental level. And if a child doesn't respond after being told to stop, and that is accompanied with strong upset feelings such as anger or anxiety.
How do these behaviors typically develop, or what are the causalities behind it?
That's a great question, because that's
It's the crux of what you do.
Yeah, it speaks to who is the whole child, what is the whole child. It depends on so many things. One of the myths is that, or the assumptions, and we see this a lot, parents will come in and they realize that their child acted out sexually with another child, whether it was in their home or a neighbor friend, and they immediately jump to, oh my gosh, my child must have been sexually abused. So the research does not support that sexual abuse is the cause of children sexually harming another. What the research points to is that it is in fact witness to violence and physical abuse that influences the level of sexual behavior.
And I assume that could be witnessing it in your own home, but would it also include seeing it on television, movies, that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a huge impact. I mean, how do we address that as a society?
Yeah, I think as a society, yes, we look at the external factors, and we understand that the external factors can be really dysregulating, if you will, cause confused emotions inside of a child. And if a child is developmentally not able to put words to their feelings, then it comes out in behavior.
Sure.
And sexual behavior can be one of those behaviors.
How can parents or caregivers understand what is normal?
That is a great question. What I see often with families who realize there's a problematic sexual behavior that has come up in their family, they get really alarmed. Part of that is not necessarily the behavior, but it's also the history of the caregiver, the parents, or whoever the caregiver is. And I don't know if we do, I know that we do not do a good enough job in our society talking about sexual development. And me included, with my own kids, I struggle with how am I going to convey this information that I was not brought up in a way that said, yes, be open and be communicative. Yeah. So parents can often get really not only alarmed, but they can also respond in an exaggerated kind of way.
How does that impact a child if you freak out as a parent? Does that impact the child's behavior? Does it make them feel like less than normal? How does that impact them?
Yeah, I know that response is so important. I like to say that the significance of the incident, the sexual behavior incident itself, is not as big as the response. The response is so important. And what I would say to parents is that we need to listen. And so if you ask yourself, how should I respond if I walk in on my kids and they're behaving sexually with each other? First of all, get curious. What is this? Different families have different family cultures. So you think about what your family's values are. And what are they doing? Is this a natural and healthy exploration? Is it age appropriate? But mainly try to stay calm. That's super important to the child's well-being. When you get alarmed, the child gets alarmed.
Sure.
And
So would that be the first thing then, is to ask, what are you doing? Very calmly, what are you doing?
yeah.
Okay.
What are you doing? Do you all have questions?
Mm-hmm.
Let me know what's happening. Yeah.
I'm just going to say it right now. That's going to have to be hard for a parent.
Yeah.
Because I think the first instinct is to freak out, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Well, we're all learning something here today.
Yes, we are. The other thing is to reassure your child that you care about them, that I care about you, and that's why I'm interested in what's going on here.
Oh, that's perfect.
The other thing is remember that, for parents, remember that you aren't alone. I gave the statistic earlier, and the other one is that 1/3 of all sexual offenses against children are committed by other youth. So,
Really?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
a
wow.
national statistic. 1/4 of sexual offenses committed by youth are with family members. Youth often act out sexually with children they know and see often, such as siblings, friends, classmates, or neighbors.
Wow.
And this is children from all different races, genders, families, and backgrounds, socioeconomic levels. All children can have problematic sexual behaviors.
Wow. I think the awareness factor is really important, and we've seen quite a few celebrities talking about this. And I know like Kesha and Oprah have been very vocal about bringing awareness to remove stigma. But what you were just talking about with youth on youth is Vanessa Williams shared that she'd been abused at a very young age on vacation, and I believe she said by another young person, and she was around the age of 10. And she said that she believes that experience is what caused her to be sexually awakened at way too early of an age. And I guess my question to that is that a fairly typical response? Does it actually bring about early sexual awareness in general? And does that become problematic later in life?
I would say more than sexual awareness, I would say it brings about confusion.
Mm-hmm.
It's very confusing for a child. Sexual experience is not the same for a child as it is for adults, says the research. And so I would say the word is confusing. And the work of the parent, the caregivers, is to help organize that confusion.
Yeah. So when you were talking about kind of, things to look for, resources, where would you point somebody who thinks that maybe their children are acting inappropriately or trying to kind of self-diagnose whether it's normal or not? Where would you send them?
One of the most useful things I have found is this booklet by Tony Kavanaugh Johnson. It was updated in 2015. The other, and one of them was updated in 2016. So there are two of them. One is helping children with sexual behavior problems. The other is understanding children's sexual behaviors. And in there is a chart, and it has natural and healthy behaviors, concerning behaviors, and seek professional help behaviors.
Wow.
And it lists those. And I recommend those to parents so that we can begin to understand that two children playing doctor doesn't mean that there has been abuse, or there is or abuse is being done, or there's some kind of coercion being done. So we want to know when and where and how to really shed this positive, natural, healthy attitude towards sexual development. And that booklet has been very helpful.
So I'm looking at the book. She was kind enough to bring it. So if you're looking for it, I'm going to assume you can probably find it on Amazon, but you can also find it on the website www.tcavjohn.com.
And there are so many other resources as well. One of the websites that I use is the National Center for the Sexual Behavior of Youth. So National Center for the Sexual Behavior of Youth. The other is a good one about trauma, and that is the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, NCTSN. Both of those are .org.
So those are great resources. Thank you for sharing them. I know the work that you guys are doing with the Problematic Sexual Behaviors Diversion Program is really critical, especially to the community here. How is the work that you're doing at the center changing the response that people are typically having in this realm?
First of all, the most concrete example of the change is in the language that we use, even among our committee, and then increasingly among our multidisciplinary team. And that's changing the language from alleged offender that I used earlier to a child child-centered language, a child with problematic sexual behavior. And just that change in language has changed our focus and what we're emphasizing.
So I think that's really a good question, though, is how important is the language that we use in responding to this kind of behavior?
Yeah. It's really important because the language can contribute to, when we use words like perpetrator, offender, that is adult language. And it's shaming. Mm-hmm. It's can create guilt. And I think caregivers are influenced by that too, because that's their go-to response.
Sure.
When they get alarmed, is they're thinking, oh, my child is a perpetrator, and it can be very alienating for the parent and for the child. So I would say with our programming, that's really where we start. And it's a mouthful to say child with problematic sexual behavior, and it's worth it.
Well, sure, but we have long-winded ways of saying children have autism, and it's perfectly acceptable for us to do that. So mm-hmm. It's just a change in direction, right? Mm-hmm. Do you find that some parents or caregivers are almost afraid to seek out help because they're afraid that they will be blamed for the behavior?
Oh, yeah. And the shame and the guilt. And one of the responses that I see with parents is, what did I do wrong? Mm-hmm. I should have done something to protect my child. Then you've got the complexity, too, when it's two children in the same family. Mm-hmm. The parent loves their children, and it puts them in a position where they're conflicted.
Sure.
They want to keep both children safe. They have an urge to punish based on how we handle sexual behavior in our culture. And so that question of, is this my fault? I'm ashamed. And that's why we don't actually have the real numbers on problematic sexual behavior, I believe, is because it's hard to make that call and say, this is what I'm noticing and this is what I'm worried about. So if nothing else from this discussion, I would hope that parents would be more empowered to call a local children's advocacy center.
Sure. Well, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, I do want to continue talking, though, about what are the actual signs, because I don't think we've really delved into that. And then we're going to take some questions from social media. But just a reminder to everybody listening that anyone affected by sexual assault can find support. We would encourage you to look at the National Sexual Assault Hotline, calling them at 1-800-656-HOPE. And we will be right back to continue this conversation.
Remember how you made me crazy? Remember how I didn't care? Left it all on the kitchen table for my heart to bear. We used to run along the shoreline on the sands of Malibu, holding hands in the shallow waters, promises and I love yous. Oh, the stars we counted, laying on the hood of your car. Oh, now, and I'm praying for an endless summer.
back with Future of Health, talking with our guest, MC Jenny. MC, tell me, I know parents out there, everybody listening is going, okay, my biggest question is, how do I know if this is normal or not? My 6-year-old is doing this, my 15-year-old is doing this. What are age-appropriate actions that they should not worry about?
That they should not worry about.
Yes.
I love that question because that has, yes, there's going to be sexual behavior and there is positive, natural, and healthy sexual behavior. And I would say, for example, let's take a preschool child. So a preschool child, what's natural and healthy would be they touch or rub their own genitals when diapers are being changed, when going to sleep, when tense, excited, afraid, or just because it feels good. Mm-hmm. You walk into your room. This happened to me. I walked into my daughter's room and, age appropriate. And I'm thinking, yep, that's age appropriate. And I'm thinking, we want to shed some positive light around this. So we get into an age appropriate discussion.
That has to be the hardest part, though, the age appropriate discussion.
You know what? You just reminded me of something. Discussion. Parents think, okay, it's this big discussion that we have to have. So parents get themselves all ready and they gather data.
Sit down.
What am I going to say? How's this going to go? I'm uncomfortable. Here's an easy remedy, and that is have 120-second conversations.
Oh, smart.
Small doses. It's developmentally appropriate, right? How many of us know what it's like when you say, we're going to talk about sex now, and your child would roll their eyes. But if you do it from a young age, in little doses, it's easier for both of you.
Which we do about other topics. We do that about religion. We do that about manners. We do that about every other topic in life, right? Why would we not do that around
this? We don't save up for this. Maybe when my child is old enough, maybe I'll have the courage to talk about these difficult things.
By the time most parents have it, I think the kids could actually give them the lecture anyway, which is pretty entertaining.
Isn't that? Yeah. Yeah.
So what would be then sexually or age appropriate for, say, I don't know, a middle school kid or 10-year-old?
Let's take a 4th grader.
Okay.
Natural and healthy is asks about genitals, breasts, intercourse, babies, is interested in peeking at people doing bathroom functions, plays doctor. The child inspects another child's body, including private parts. Boys and girls are interested in having or birthing a baby. They talk about that. So that would be natural and healthy. Again, it's not only the behavior that we focus on, it's the context. Are there other things going on? Is there disruption in the home? Did a family member just experience something that could be challenging and hard for this child? So it's really not solely about the behavior. It's being aware of your child's whole life.
So if I'm a parent, when is the right time for me to say, I'm not sure this is age appropriate, or I'm not sure that this is quote unquote normal? I should go ask an expert. What advice would you give a parent who's really kind of on the fence of, I'm just really not sure if this is the right thing or not?
I think that's a perfect time to reach out and ask. There are all kinds of curriculums. I was just looking at one the other day that's called Our Whole Lives. It's a curriculum that organizations can use, and I was reading through it and thinking, wow, this is amazing information. So I would encourage families to find out what's in your community that would help guide your parenting in order to guide your child.
Sure. I think again, it's a non-question, right? You would ask your other parents when you ask them about when is the right time to teach them to ride a bicycle, when is the right time for them to be out of diapers. Mm-hmm. This would be a pretty typical question, I would think. Mm-hmm. Well, for those though who are victims, I guess, who's most at risk? What are those kind of factors that parents and caregivers should be prepared for?
Who's most at risk? Like I said earlier, it is a myth that it is sexual abuse that causes sexual behavior in a child later. It is exposure to violence, witness to violence. That can be in the home, that can be out of the home, it can be on television, it can be over the internet. Is there a history of abuse or neglect? Is the living situation unsafe in any way? Is the community unsafe? seeing sexual acts such as viewing pornography or witnessing other youth or adults doing sexual things, and lack of supervision in the home.
Okay.
Yeah. We see cases where supervision can be challenging for a lot of families, and understanding the positive impact that having open doors and making clear that it's important for everyone to know what's going on in the house. And speaking of doors, if a child is touching themselves in a way that makes others uncomfortable, that is a sign that something is not quite right. And especially if a child is asked several times, numerous times, repeatedly. And typically a parent can ask, it's okay to touch yourself, because it can feel good to touch ourselves. Our bodies are designed that way. We just do it in private. And you say that in a very lighthearted, accepting, non-judgmental way.
So speaking of doors, I'm going to ask the question I think a lot of parents are out there wondering, if my child walks in on us having sex, what do I say? How do I make it not scary?
Well, find out. I would say let's back up a little bit, okay? So let's set the scenario. The best scenario would be that this is a family that really communicates about feelings already. We talk about what's going on in the family. We're open, we're expressive, so you've got that foundation laid. And then something happens where they've witnessed, they've opened the door, and there you are, and positive, natural, healthy. Those are the components to focus on in that situation.
That sounds really easy. Not sure every parent would agree with you on that, but yes, it's the right direction.
Yeah, it's such an opportunity. There's so many opportunities which I think we can be taking for learning together, educating, hearing what the questions are, and having fun with that.
Yeah. Really, parents probably should just be prepared for that, right? Like if you're going to have kids, that's just one of those things you should be prepared for. They're going to ask you about Santa Claus. They're probably going to walk in on you, right? Be prepared. Well, I think we'll take a few questions from social media now because this is a very important topic to people. So the first one we have is, with everything on social media nowadays, how can I control how my kids learn about sex?
I would say, if I were given a chance to say one word, it would be participation. Like participating with your child in activities, including the internet. We often see the internet as a way to sometimes keep our children busy so that we can get things done. However, I really think so much can be improved by really taking the time to do internet activities with our children, so that they learn, they identify with when they are online. They have this feeling like, oh, this is something I do with my parent, with my trusted adult. This is something we do together, so that life on the internet is not something that's something they go off alone and secretly do. So I would say to parents, yes, know as much as you can about what your kids are learning, not in a you can't do this, you shouldn't do this, not in a fear-based way, but more in an exploratory kind of way. What are you learning? What are your questions? What's challenging you right now? What's confusing to you right now? Let's talk about that together.
That goes back to you're having 120-second conversations, always talking about it, so that it's not just this one and done kind of a thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, let's answer this question. I'm too uncomfortable to have the conversation about sex with my child. Should I go to the doctor, my neighbors, a friend? What would you recommend to somebody who is too uncomfortable for
all
the
of
conversation?
them. The more we all talk about sexuality and development and shed positive light on that, the better. So
we all need to stop the stigma, basically, is what you're saying.
Yes, we all need to stop the stigma.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, I think we have time for one more quick question. Is it true that children who have been abused will become abusers themselves when they grow up?
It is not true. The research does not show that sexually abused children will become abusers. That is a myth, and that is not supported.
I'm glad that we're breaking that myth. We are going to take another quick break. When we come back, we will continue the conversation about the First Step Resource Center. We'll be right back.
When I see you on the street, my whole body gets weak. When you stand in the crowd, your love talks to me so loud. Girl, do I do what you do when I do my love to you? When I hear you on the phone, your sweet, sexy voice turns my ear all the way on. Just a mention of your name seems to drive my head insane. Girl, do I do what you do when I do my love to you, baby? Yes, I got some candy kisses for your lips. Yes, I got some honeysuckle chocolate dripping kisses full of love for you. Yes, I got some candy kisses for your lips. Yes, I got some honeysuckle chocolate dripping kisses full of love for you. My life has been waiting for your love. My arms have been waiting for your love to arrive. My heart has been waiting, my soul anticipating your love, love, love.
And we're back on the Future of Health. So, MC, tell me a little bit about what you guys have learned through this pilot program. Any good learnings, insights, outcomes that we could share?
One of the first learnings is the challenges of changing stigma around sexual behavior and what it means. That we have learned a lot about that. And we've also learned that there's a lot of research out there that points to children receiving treatment for sexual behavior and families is really effective. And we want to give as many families the chance at getting treatment as possible. So one of the outcomes of that has been we've set up a program with care coordination, and we have therapists in the community that we have had trained in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy with a problematic sexual behavior component. And so we have been referring families to these therapists. And so we're getting a body of knowledge and experience and training in our community. It's been really valuable. And we also, one thing we're doing is the multidisciplinary team is key in this because the agencies need to speak to each other. Obviously, everyone wants a safer community, and we are up against a sort of fear-based response to sexual behavior. And being able for the team to talk to each other, to work together, to sort out what are the issues here, what are the obstacles. So we're really in the learning. I wouldn't say we have concrete outcomes right now, but we're really in the learning phase. And what has been remarkable is when a family is struggling with sexual behavior of their children, their child or children, for them to know, for them to get beyond that place of fear, and them to realize, for the family to realize that actually there are people who can talk about this with them and can support them and help them, and people who can focus on our family's resilience and support us and see us as a whole family. That has been really powerful. It's built on connection and empowerment.
It's kind of the philosophy of you're not alone and you can get through it.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And so the more this program is being talked about, and the more grounded the team gets in, the work, the more we're able to figure out what does this child and family really need at this point. It's not to say that some children and families won't need a more court-related
Sure.
approach. That may be, but at least we've looked at it and we've assessed, and we're seeing the whole family.
Well, and even if it does go to that point, you're still there to support them through that process, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that matters.
Yeah.
How's the community response been to this program?
The community has been curious.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, the system response has been more of a criminal approach, and change is difficult. So, in terms of the professional community, there's some pushback, and I think that's natural. And there are others who are saying, yes, we want this. For example, law enforcement sitting at our MDT table, our multidisciplinary table, wondering, this is a 7-year-old.
Right.
I don't know what to do with this, but him feeling the burden of, I should do something, but I don't know what to do. It helps our team.
Sure.
It
I have
benefits.
to respond, but this is not the response I want to go with.
Yeah.
There has to be other options.
Yeah. So we've seen some relief in having other options.
Are you at capacity? I mean, are you guys seeing that many cases that you're at a point now where you may need to expand in the future?
We hope so, because we know there's a lot more behavior going on that's concerning that people are speaking up about because, like we said, because of the stigma around it.
Sure.
We're not at capacity. Our doors are open to say, where are you families, and we're here for you. And we want to work with you. I recently worked with a family in our community, and really what we did was, it's really what we're aiming for, and that was to have, after about a year of treatment for both children and the family, we were all able to sit down together and just experience what it feels like to have moved on and to have healed. And that's what we hope for many, many families.
Yeah, that's amazing.
For all the families we work with.
It's great that this program exists and that it's really focused on the youth. I wonder, though, because I think it was music artist, actor Common, who talked about how he was on set right now for a movie, and I guess this was a little while ago, but when he was going through the script, something triggered in him, and he had a memory, and then he just had this flood of memories about when he was 9 or 10, and he was abused by a family friend. And although he said, I've been able to cope with it, I really wanted to just push it back in my brain and forget all about it. What happens to those people? What resources are there for people who maybe were victimized as a child and just forgot about it or buried it and are now realizing it?
Yeah. I think children are amazing at developing, I call them superpowers, and really their coping skills. They're not always functional. A coping skill may work when they're a child. For example, a child not remembering it. The brain doesn't process it in a way that creates a concrete memory or an explicit memory. But the memory is implicit, and that can be really helpful to a child in the moment.
Sure.
But it doesn't last forever,
Sure.
For example, in his case. And what would I say to someone who's remembering something about their past? And I realize that talking about this issue and listening about it can bring things up for people. I would say, yes, see if you can talk to someone. Yeah.
Has to be hard. Well, for those of you who are listening, we're going to remind you that if this triggered anything for you, or if someone you know is struggling, please reach out to the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOPE. And MC, this has been a really important topic, and the work you do is just, it's really beautiful. I'm not going to lie. It's truly amazing what you do. Is there any family or case or program or anything that really sticks out that you've been able to see kind of the beautiful other side outcome that you'd like to share with us?
I would. Well, a lot of families are coming to my mind right now.
You can never pick one.
Yeah, and the part of it, what's common to these families is an experience of growing closer, and an experience of learning more about each other and feeling proud of each other, no matter what was going on with the child, what the behavior was at the time. So I think it's that place where families come together again and they're like, you know what, we're closer than ever. And we didn't know it was possible, and I was so mad, and I was just so angry at first and so confused by this, and then mad at my child because I just didn't understand, and mad at my child, but I love my child, and it was hard. And then to see a family sit down and just look at each other and say, I see you. I see the whole you.
That's
and
beautiful.
I understand more.
Yeah. That's amazing. What is it that inspires you to do this work? Is it that? Is it those outcomes?
You know, I think it's that there's something about taboo topics for me. You know, I think sexual abuse, it so easily becomes invisible, goes underground. And I'm just really drawn to the experience of saying, no, you don't need to do this alone. And we can do this together, and you're not alone, and let's shed some light on this so you can be who you want to be in your life. Yeah, you can be the you strive to be and want to be.
Well, we are most grateful for the work that you and your colleagues do. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, MC Jenny, and to everyone for listening and sending in your questions. More information can be found on providence.org by searching for the First Step Resource Center. Well, thank you to MC Jenny for joining us today, and to everyone for listening and sending in your questions. More information can be found on providence.org by searching for First Step Resource Center. We look forward to a future topic with more experts from Providence St. Joseph Health. Make sure to follow us on social media at PSJH on Twitter and on Instagram, and under Providence St. Joseph Health on Facebook. To learn more about our mission, programs, and services, visit future.psjhealth.org. Thank you.